Sean, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Templeton Advisory Committee for 15 November. It's a regular meeting. I've got 18:30 as a start time. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our normal chair is out in storm preparation, so as the co-chair, I'll be filling in tonight. Tonight's agenda, we've got Carter Terenzini to do some briefings on revenue projections, town meeting planning, tax recap submission, pavement management, and a little information on some Chapter 90 monies. We've also got any updates to the budget versus actual report, which I don't think there is. I think the latest report that we had was ending September.
Nope, a new one
She
actually
just
just
sent
came
one
out at 4 o'clock today.
And I have paper copies
Okay.
for you.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Mike, if you have access to your email there, you should have it in-
Okay.
at
Yeah,
4:13.
I probably do. We've got to approve 2 sets of minutes from the pre-town and our November 1st meeting, which those were emailed out. Hopefully, everyone had a chance to look through those, so we can go through those pretty quick. If we have any discussion on the Collins memo, we can discuss that tonight, or we can table that until we have our full committee. We got to talk about the bill, but we kind of did that right before the meeting, but we can just kind of do a quick recap on that, and then any agenda items for the next meeting, and any comments from any of the members this evening. Will, welcome back. Hope you're feeling well.
Enough to be here right
Oh,
now.
excellent. We're glad that you're here. We would never kick you off the board, bylaw or no bylaw. Carter, good evening.
Where do you want to start? We sent you a fairly wide variety of documents. We put paper in your box, and I have some additional things to distribute, and I can discuss and brief you on. Whatever order you want to proceed in, it's your
Yeah, I mean,
pleasure.
if you want to set the cadence, that's fine. I was
Sure.
really interested to,
So perhaps we'll start by ticking off the list that you had right there. I think revenue projections.
revenue projections.
We're first, and those will be the spreadsheets that are there on the bottom for you. Okay?
That was
Um,
electronically, right?
Are you gonna pass those out?
Yep.
Thank you.
But I think that was sent electronically,
was.
wasn't
Yes,
it?
it was, but sometimes it's, I'm old enough to still not be able to do it unless it's got paper in front of me,
No, that's fine.
you know?
Gotta figure out.
I just
Gotta figure out
can't
where I
do
put
that,
it.
everything on a
Was November 8th.
screen thing.
No.
So,
November
the way that this works is early in November, we prepare a estimate of what we think the revenues will be for the coming fiscal year. We follow the financial management policy, which we suggested folks perhaps refer to, and we follow the narrative in the budget book, which I think we sent you a sample from last year for those of you who didn't have the full budget books. The accountant prepares a request following that pattern, and then I review it this year because of we're trying to immerse Adam in it. He did the first review, and then I went back through it. I will draw your attention to a couple of things of note. About 6 lines or so down, rows down, motor vehicle excise tax. You'll notice that we collected for actual in fiscal 18, 1,152,600,000. It would be a mistake to use that number and to go forward with that kind of number. So we use, and not to bore you, but what we call the 5-year rule. Sometimes I slip and call it the 3-year rule, where I take 5 years of actual revenues, I throw out the high, I throw out the low, I average the 3 in the middle, and then depending upon changes in statute, changes in the fee structure, changes in the economy, we slip that up perhaps a skush, or we start bringing it down a skush if we think we're headed. So in this year, the average following that rule was 1,021,000. We think 1,025,000 is a reasonable number. So I did want to draw your attention to that. On chapter pilots and rollbacks, again, it's down a little bit. They're going to be off a little bit. We don't use exactly what the accountant did, because as you and I work together, you'll see I'm kind of anal about the numbers. I just flatten things out in increments of thousands, 250 and the like. So those are the, take a chance to review those. You will note 4 lines up from the bottom that the regional school district appears to have decided to purchase a vehicle and do their own snow plowing. The bad news is we will lose 25,000. Remember, we were paying 85% of that anyways. The good news is it will free up equipment and man-hours that frankly we're short on both
Right.
of.
So have they already bought the vehicle, or?
My understanding, and I may not have this completely right, they're planning to, they either have done it or they're planning for their 20 budget
Okay.
to do that. But for this year, for fiscal 19, it'll be the same thing going forward. Phillipston had decided to stay with us for dispatch. I kept that number fairly flat. Kevin Flynn and I have been working on a new IMA, intermunicipal agreement, to codify that arrangement. It will move to a percentage of calls basis based upon a rolling average of the number of calls. So until we get that formula in place, I won't know exactly where it is, but I think it'll be fairly close for our purposes at this time. Mart Transportation, that number looks off, but you have to remember that we have to budget for the maximum number of rides we think we might get. That we then assume that if we give all those rides, we'll get that amount of grant. If we don't give all the rides, we don't get the grant, but it's a net zero. There's no change.
Right.
Because we haven't incurred the expense. The important thing to always remember is if the money hasn't been used in the Council on Aging budget, the senior services, and you get into June and you look at the budget and say, oh, there's $50,000 there, we can transfer it. Well, if it's there because you haven't given the rides, don't transfer it because you don't have the revenue. So that's kind of an institutional memory thing that people need to know about. There was some comment, the question was not posed to us directly, but there was some comment on the meals tax. Can you distribute that, please? And I want to address that real quick. It'd be helpful if this is in front of you. Our estimate for next year is $42,000. And we came about that estimate in 2 ways. On the front page, you will see at the time that we began working on the meals tax, and unfortunately DLS is not as up to date as we'd like, that had we collected the meals tax during this time period, we would have collected $49,000. So in reviewing that a year ago when we began these discussions, I knocked it down by 15%. Said, I want a safety factor, I don't wanna use $49,000.
Right.
And for those who were following that, I think you may remember, we said the estimate was 42 to 50,
Right,
and we
I
were gonna
recall.
use the 42. Now, we've received $4,300 in change so far, and the question is, oh my golly, geez, that can't be right. You have to understand that the quarters, the restaurants pay the meals tax in, and the quarter for which they report it to DOR, and the quarter for which DOR pays us, do not line up and make any sense to most folks, okay? So the restaurant, this lower half here, if their taxes are collected in May, June, and July, they report May and June, June and July, July in August. Well, the department then in September, in the middle of our first quarter, not at the conclusion, sends us a check for what they collected in August based upon what the restaurant collected in July. So this will flatten out over the year, and $4,500 times 12, 50,000 plus. The estimate was 50,000. We knocked it down. So we're really pretty comfortable that we'll be well within the range that we had projected last year and for next year.
So do the restaurants, they don't report to the town how much they've
That's,
collected?
from an administrative standpoint, that's the beauty of it. They change their registers, however they do it,
Yeah.
to 7%. They send that to the state. The state knows that, whatever 0.75 percentage is of that, that's ours.
Okay.
State then sends us the check.
So you really don't know what they've collected until you get the check?
The only way we would know would be to do a reverse math and say, oh, all the restaurants in Templeton collected this much,
But
which meant
everything,
they had that much in
everything you've
sales.
seen so far is the tax kind of lines up with your projection, even though the data's a couple months behind.
Yeah.
Just because of the process,
Yeah.
okay.
If someone thought that the September check was 3 months, no, but, if the question had been posed to us, we could have explained. And,
But
and even the quarters, they're not what someone would normally think of. So we're pretty comfortable with it, but we wanted you to be aware of it. Now, the selectmen, I know that the meetings don't line up perfectly, but the selectmen will not adopt these revenue estimates until the 28th of this month.
I have a question concerning that. As you remember, the advisory questioned the use of that money for this particular year.
Yes.
And that was based on the fact that we were aware at that particular time, I don't know if you were aware or the rest of the town hall was aware, but there was a couple of restaurants that were actually closing and that will be closed for some time. I mean, that's going to impact that. And to take it, end up seeing the money being spent through the budgeting process as it was brought out to us was a concern to us, and that's what the pushback was last year.
I understand your concerns, and frankly, if we had, more room in the budget and we could have done the capital things that we needed to do, I would have deferred to those concerns. But I had two things that I needed to try to accomplish. Number one was we really needed to try to address some capital issues. Number two, the only pushback that we got on the meals tax was, how do we know you're going to use it for what you say you're going to use it for? And the only way that I thought I could give a compelling presentation to town meeting and to the citizenry to say, you can trust us, at least for 3 years, to do what we say we're going to do, is to have these two tie-barred articles: adopt the tax, spend the tax.
I got
So,
that piece,
are there-
but that's a good point. I mean, several restaurants closing?
Yeah.
Did any open though? I mean,
One of them may be opened 6 months from now,
so,
because they just bought the building. I'm aware of because my son, he works with the individual or his wife that is looking to end up opening that restaurant. It's gonna be one. And also, there was another one that was in the midst of actually getting out of the business and changing it over to somebody else. As you know, a startup, you don't, that's a tough business. And you don't get all that business when you start up a new one.
No, I agree.
You have to build that clientele.
I agree, but I think that they have to take best case example of these are the facts we know. I mean, you could have a restaurant just close or catch fire or, God forbid, catch fire, where all of a sudden here you thought you're gonna get revenue from that successful business that's not gonna be coming in. So I think that they're, if they know a restaurant's closing for sure, you could take that into account. But I think if you don't know for a fact, you just have to go based on your best data available trying to do this.
Well, we were aware, the advisory at that time was aware of those.
Well, I think we have to try to be, look at the facts, apply reasonable assumptions, downgrading them where appropriate, and then be guided by best judgment. I understand the advisory committee's concerns. Hopefully you understand the reasons we did what we did. And I do think that will be proven out to be within the margins of safety.
Yeah.
So your December estimate is about 3 times what
Yeah.
you collected in September.
Yeah, it's seasonal. I cannot sort it all out for you, how it goes up and down. If it was in my region, I could tell you exactly. Come Memorial Day, when the population in my community goes from 4,000 to 24,000, I know what's going to start to happen with the meals tax. Here, I don't.
I think you almost need a couple years of data to kind of,
And we looked back over what we would have collected over 3 or 4 years, because they have history going back over 10 years.
I do have one question, Mr. Terrazini, is that I see the debt exclusion.
Yes.
Can you give us a breakdown of that debt exclusion? Because that's almost $1.8 million, and that's the school and the police station?
Be happy to do that when we get, do you want to try to do the recap then? I don't want to jump around too much, but it's part of the materials we have for you on the recap sheet if you
Oh,
like.
okay, that'd be fine.
Yeah,
We can just wait till we get
you
there.
just wait.
Sure. So,
Do you mind waiting, Will? Just waiting till we get there. Let's finish with this first. Okay, thanks.
we gave you the countdown
Yeah, everyone's got
to
it.
the town meeting.
yep.
We advised the select board of the desire of this committee to do sort of a one and done. I don't want to mislead you in any fashion. Over the couple of years I've been with you, the two boards have spent well over 14 hours. So both the presenting folks and the inquiring folks are going to need to, have done their homework coming into the meetings and kind of drive things home a little bit. But the plan of the moment is a Saturday,
Yeah, we were
8:30
good
to
with that.
4:30, something. We've already slotted the following Saturday as a snow date. And then that would be the presentation. You'll have the budget book for about 10 days.
Speaking about the budget books, we asked last year, and I don't know how these folks feel, but I'd like to see that electronically versus a paper copy. I think that's
We gave it to you in an electronic copy, sir. We gave you the spreadsheet.
not with the updates. You made updates and that wasn't presented so that we could take a look at that and look at the whole picture.
If you remember, the updates are not done in each detail sheet each time we make one. We have one single tab for updates. Happy to send it out to you after we do each set.
Yeah. If you get the basic document and then.
Yeah,
say,
and then we
okay,
have one
line
single
for each,
tab, so it says, at this meeting,
Yeah.
this was cut, here's how many dollars. At this meeting, something was added,
Okay.
here's how many dollars. But we don't adjust all of the detail sheets until we're all done and through the process.
Yeah, I mean.
But we're happy to send the
yeah, if
spreadsheet
we're-
out to you.
Yeah, if we're
after
provided what
each.
those updates
Sure.
are, you essentially say,
Yeah.
go do it yourself, but that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's fine.
happy to, not a problem.
fine.
Can you remember that, please, Anna? So you'll have the budget book for about 10 days, and 8:30 Saturday, we'll have coffee, some donuts,
It's in March.
such. We'll bring lunch in, whether it's, subs, pizza, whatever. Go to 4:30. I mean, I'll start you as early as I can
Yep.
get everybody
Just
to
as
agree
long as it
to.
generates meal taxes someplace.
It will. Although we are tax exempt.
Oh, nice try, Mike.
We'll keep you as long as we can. We want to get all the questions out of you that we can, please. If you have questions that going into the Saturday morning, get those to us by email so we can prep the department heads. Then about 10 days later, there's 2 nights. One's a Thursday, one's a Monday, trying to work around as many different meetings and when the rooms is available. The second night being a snow date, hopefully. We'll have another 3 hours, give or take, in which we can get you back any questions that you've asked and look at the warrants and any other things. Try to have the formal budget to you by the end of that month. If you set your pre-town meeting, give me at least 2 weeks' notice. Be happy to be here.
Okay,
Okay?
that's a good plan.
We've given you also our target date to put the voter's guide out on the street. We want to get that out a little bit earlier. If you would like to have your recommendation in that again, let us know. I think that worked out very nicely. People had everything in the one book. Let us know. We'll be happy to do that. If you think the voter's guide, maybe you want to add some financial information. We have a page or 2 in there, some common terms, maybe you'd like to add. Just let us know, or if you think there's room for improvement, let us know, and we're open to that.
How, getting a little ahead, but I noticed the town meeting scheduled for a Wednesday, which is an evening. We found that Saturdays tends to be kind of a good day. You might get more participation than a Wednesday evening.
Actually, participation went down
Did it?
over some of the town meetings, according to records kept by the town clerk, and is now ordinance or bylaw
Okay.
that we've moved it. I will tell you that fall was a little painful to me. And I have reached out, we were there a long time for not many articles. And I have reached out to both the moderator and the town clerk to talk about some things that we might do to perhaps move the meeting along a little bit more.
Okay.
The only thing that's not on the schedule is you may recall that the selectmen, just before adopting the final warrant, and we had the gent in from Green Communities, a couple of you. I know, Mike, you were there, and you were there,
I don't remember if I was there.
yeah. I'm not sure if the board will do that again
Well, I
or
was at
not,
town
they
meeting.
might.
Oh, okay.
We'll add that as soon as we know.
For the prior to town meeting, or having actually the guy there?
Well, if we have any items like that,
Yeah,
I will have somebody there,
right.
as we had the State Green Communities gentleman there.
Both were beneficial. One, because the people who are involved in everything saw it, and then having the guy there for the people who don't go to the meetings and then have questions about it, or put wildly inaccurate statements out before the vote. You actually have the subject matter there to either, dispel or otherwise. So it was definitely beneficial. I think what the 60 or 70 people that we had for town meeting, what they wanted it to be read. Yeah, they had the voting guide in front of them, but their issue was it wasn't being uttered. It was just like, it was like a parliamentary procedure to them rather than actually explaining what was going on.
There were 3 that weren't read. One was 5 pages in length.
Absolutely.
2 of them were a full page apiece. So there are many town meetings, in one of my former town meetings, where the motion is, for every single article, I move to waive the reading and approve the article as published, boom, boom, and I get it that that's a little fast for some folks, but I will be talking with the moderator about, was
I
3
agree.
too
We
many?
lost control.
At what point do you still need to read everything? Because many people want to come in do their business, and go home.
Right,
They're really not interested in having 6 pages read.
right.
And the codification
It's
is
not
gonna
gonna change
be
anything reading it
over
out.
300 pages.
Mhm.
It'll be available online 45 days in advance. And I just don't think it's practical to read some of these.
Yep. Will
So
do.
but that's open to some continuing discussion.
On your revenue projection sheet, FY 19, on the back, it says you use the actual debt schedule or bond lead as we had asked. We have yet to see that bond lead, which, when the bond lead that we had seen previously
Will.
in previous advisories, was that the, actually showed you what each year was broken out, and it showed you what year it would be paid out. And that way there, when you start looking at the columns, you can end up actually saying, okay, in this FY, you have 1.5 million. The next FY, you've paid off a bond, you have 1.3 million. That's the type of documentation that is helpful for looking at and planning the overall finances when we have to look at some of this stuff, at least in my experience.
And as I gave you the individual sheets, and as I told you, we will be reconstructing. I do not have faith in the old bond lead schedules I was left with. We will be reconstructing one, but frankly, that's not amongst our priorities in relation to other matters.
So, Will, I handed everything out to you, but I do want, for the cadence of the meeting, I gave it to Carter to go through it, and I think we're gonna go through it document by document, so
Okay.
I don't wanna jump ahead.
Okay.
Especially if you're looking for him to have a response for it. I'd like to go
So
through
that's,
the materials that
that's
you've done.
scheduling, that's the voter information guide, that's some added
Yeah,
materials.
Very helpful.
Let us know this entire package, which consists of the budget guidance memo, the countdown to town meeting, the revenue projection, the spreadsheets, will all be out electronically on or about December 1. It will be due back on or about January 2. Strike that. It will be due back January 2.
And, you know, we meet the first and third Thursdays of the month, so I'm looking, that helps us there. But after the budget workshop, which is scheduled for the 21st, and you talked about having, you know, it's in our hands for consumption. I'm looking at it.
I-
Are-
Yeah, because the 21st would be our meeting day, right?
Would it?
Is that the third?
Yes, yep, we're meeting on the 21st.
Well, we're not, because we'll be there. We'll be at this meeting instead.
Yep. So that means that we have April 4th.
But I think that's only if we have to go with the snow date, isn't it?
No, the
this-
21st would be our regular meeting.
Yep, I'm looking at the calendar now. We do have a meeting for that date.
Well,
So
you-
that's the workshop.
You can have some discussion on that, and if I can adjust it in some manner that meets the end goals, we'll be happy to try to adjust it a little bit,
Okay. Yeah, let's tweak all that later.
okay?
Yep, we just need to be cognizant of our regular meetings or whether we need to add a meeting. Because once we add that, it's the consumption time that I'd be concerned with.
Yep.
Okay, anything else
Okay.
on the countdown?
Anything else on that one?
No, but this is very helpful for dates wise. Thank you very much.
Did you all get, pardon me for bouncing around, but I'm kind of looking at this, did you all get this?
Yep.
Okay. And I think we sent out the link to this. This is the full study. Would
I
you
think
like
so. I
one
think I
paper
got it.
copy? I've got one.
No, I
Committee
think we
members
got
can read
everything.
it at
I'm
length
pretty
if they
sure.
like, or,
Was it, was it, distilled down to the?
Yes.
Okay,
yep. So,
what's next?
big bottom line here, chapter 90, road study, you may, we've been getting about 335. Road study says we need to spend $1.1 million just to stay where we are. In order to gain some progress, make some progress, we need $1.8 million. I think we all know that's not very realistic. So we've come at this a little bit differently. And Mike, you should have in front of you, I think, is there a memo titled Allocation of Chapter 90 Monies?
Yep.
Yes, okay,
have
thank you. what we said to the select board is, let's start with some basics. We don't really have a process or methodology of how we use the Chapter 90 monies. So we need to have some discussion. You know, one year you spent $193,000 buying an excavator. Are you gonna buy equipment? Aren't you gonna buy equipment? Every year, sort of in the spring, the highway superintendent would say, well, these are the roads I wanna do, and you worked from sort of a worst first approach,
A
which
prioritization.
doesn't go very far. I mean, a road, even without infrastructure or a tremendous amount of drainage, can cost you $100 a lineal foot. And we need to get out of the construction business. We're in the maintenance business, and we need to spend more time on maintenance, drainage, cutting back the shoulders, all of those kinds of things. So this is a discussion that we had with the select board, in which annually with the budget, the highway superintendent, the DPW director, would look at the Chapter 90 monies that are available, and those are going up to $400,000. He would reserve 5% for emergencies. Doesn't take much, you don't have a lot of steep hills in town, but you do have a lot of wetlands.
The 400,000 is over a 10-year period?
For each year over a 10-year period. So 4
Oh,
million.
okay, so it's, all right.
It's 400,000 per year, and that is what they're telling us is gonna be the next 10-year commitment.
Okay, and then what changes? Like a recomputation or?
Depends on when our elected representatives decide to come to grips with the need for funding infrastructure to the degree it needs to be funded.
Okay.
So the highway would reserve 5% for emergencies, you know, washout, big sinkholes, something like that. He would spend 20% on routine maintenance and drainage, crack sealing, minor localized repair. He wants to spend 5%. These are on a 3-year rolling average. So in one year, he might spend 8%, but the next year, 4%.
DPW has a discretion.
Yep,
Be given the
except for
discretion.
they have to put their plan together as part of their budget, so the selectmen are
Absolutely.
seeing it and signing it off. And so that it's submitted to Mass Highway, and it's ready to go on July 1. We don't want them spending money to the extent we can avoid it in April, May, and June, because what happens is the bills come in, we pay them, we don't get reimbursed by the state quickly enough, and we have to carry that as a negative for about 3 months. So we're trying to break that cycle. 5% on safety, 15% on preventive maintenance, some structural improvements, reconstruction, and engineering. We did get approval from the state, if we were to retain an engineer on a QBS, quality-based selection, and go through procurement, that they would approve the use of a definite term, indefinite quantity engineering firm, so we'd have somebody on call. Right now, every time there's a project, we have to go
A
out
la
and do
carte, yeah.
procurement.
So is that,
You
is
said
that
that-
someone that the state retains?
No, we would retain them. We'd say, we want to have a town engineer. Be prepared to either have within your firm or assemble a team of firms or a team of individuals, a civil engineer, a structural engineer, a hydrologist. We would name the kinds of disciplines that we want, execute a contract with them.
Okay,
And then
so it's an
when we need
IDIQ,
them-
how long is
No,
the
it's not
contract?
IDIQ, it's a definite,
Definite,
a
okay.
definite term, so. But
Definite term, indefinite quantity.
Okay.
When I've done this in the past, we've done a 3 and 3.
Yeah.
3-year term, subject to renewal for 3 years, and then you go back out and do it again. So this you can take and just let marinate. This moves us from a worst first to a maintenance approach. It lays out, to the extent future select boards follow this policy, a clear method by which budgeting happens as part of the budget process. And we have a method for allocating the funds instead of sort of what I refer to as telephone book budgeting.
this within the context of this?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. There's no
Is-
way we're gonna ever get in the near term
Right.
to what we need to do. Now, the software program that tracked all this will be used to identify the streets
Okay.
each year that we would apply this series of improvements to.
Yeah, so if you get a chance to read this, it was really interesting and was presented well. Talks about what's called a PCI, Pavement Condition Index, which Templeton currently is in the mid-50s, so it's a number between 0 and 100. And there were different proposals about spend that could bring us either up or down. So based off of this, what's the projected,
You'll keep sliding
just keep sliding,
downhill.
yeah, okay. Yep.
Yeah. You'll end up, if you cannot find, you need $1,000,001 to stay where
To
you
stay,
are
exactly.
today. And please remember, the $1,000,001 does not include drainage,
Yep.
striping, signage, engineering, police. It doesn't include any of those. That's just Bitconk in place, basically.
Okay.
Is there any thought, as far as selectmen or yourself, to end up doing something, the same thing that Spencer ended up doing, and they ended up going for an override to end up addressing some of their roads issues?
Well, they got a debt exclusion, not an override.
Yep.
They got, I'm pleased to say that between overrides and debt exclusions, between the time I was there, I think I was 11 for 12. They're now up to, I think it's something like 15 out of 19 attempts. They got $18.1 million. I think we're a ways away.
Still to pay back.
And, yeah, it has to be paid back. No, that's what they borrowed. They went out and borrowed $18.1 million of dollars. They approved that. I think we're a ways away from that. We have to at least absorb the initial debt on the school and the
Yeah,
PD.
we're
We
in
can
a
talk
tight
about
spot
that
right
in a
now.
couple of minutes. And you still have terrific
Yeah, I
problems on the operating side of the budget.
It might be prudent.
The board has
Yeah, I saw in
instructed
Adam's,
me.
and if I can interrupt, just.
Yep.
I saw that Adam addressed that kind of thing at the end of his memo to talk about, at least for the Royalston Road project, some different methods to try and, like Will was insinuating, if we've got, we're looking at an annual, how are we gonna keep things going at $1 million? That's not addressing some of the problems that are out there. I mean, the road that Jeff lives on, which I use to get to Route 2, that you have to stop to allow someone to get by. And some of the drainage issues at this time of year, it's horrible. So we've got some
We're
problems
gonna end
out
up
there.
doing some things I'd rather not do.
Yeah.
The DPW director would rather not do, but there's gonna be sections of roads where they're rutted and busted up. We're gonna end up saw cutting them, repairing them, trying to get them back to a level, and then doing a chip seal. Not because that's the right thing to do,
That's what we're gonna
but
afford.
because it's the closest we can get to doing something that's close
Right.
to being right. I'm hopeful the state will do something about the gas tax and provide more infrastructure, because this doesn't include our bridges either. And you do have several of those, all of which need temporary repair, and a single bridge can cost you, depending upon the span, doesn't take much to blow $750,000 on a bridge. So marinate on that. That's got a ways to go. You'll see that coming in with your budget package. Again, it does not address the issue. It's an attempt to move from worst first to maintenance and to have at least a methodology behind how monies are budgeted.
Understood.
One of the questions, Mike, in front of you is this sheet, this.
Yep, that's what I got next.
One of the questions that was raised only with respect to one of the donation accounts. But then I had a chance to watch your meeting, and I think the question was really more about all the trust funds and all of the donation counts in general.
You got it.
So, we have 14 trust funds that we're aware of. They are, bloody nightmare as to how some of them came to be, what we can really do. Some of them have some pretty interesting things of them. You can take 1/6 of the interest and add it to the principal, and then you can spend the principal. It's kind of messy, so messy that similar to when I first got here, you had about 250 stale checks for $28,000, and people would start to look at it and they'd go, "Oh my God," and they'd throw it in the corner and walk away. Unfortunately, they never get easier.
Right.
So what we've started is, these are all being put into a 3-ring binder. We're trying to, find those documents. So for instance, the Otis G. Rice, the interest can be expended as determined by a town meeting vote. This is gonna be one of those like that $12.30. Will the town appropriate the sum of $150 for the purpose of trying to sort out what's a good purpose, make it part of the annual consent agenda, so that it's in the warrant every year, and we're spending it. We have 4 that all refer to aid for poor, worthy poor, deserving poor, unmarried indigents, unmarried persons. Believe it or not, there's close to $100,000 in interest there.
I totally believe it, because who would want to touch that?
With
Like, these days, who wants to attach those labels?
Carter, we've systematically, within the last, with the combination that we have for the Board of Selectmen and yourself, we've written a lot of policy. We've figured out the process or methodology to get stuff done. I would say the same approach could be taken here to say, all right, I see the note you have there, submit a request to the town council so we can determine a criteria by which we can expend these funds.
So we've taken 2 steps with respect to these 4. So the step we've taken with the first fund is, let's think about what we should spend that money on. Cultural Council, Scholarship Fund, I don't know, something that would be easy peasy to get approved.
Coats, like the school does a drive for coats in the wintertime.
Something.
If a kid's not going to school with a winter coat right now, then there's a problem.
Right.
I would say that could be traced to,
So we'll look
lower
for
income or
suggestions on that.
otherwise.
We want to make it part of the consent agenda, easy peasy, sail through every year. On those 4 funds, we've done 2 things. First, sent the information to town council saying, here's the definitions, here's what I want to do, would you agree that this fits the definitions? We've reached out to the farmers workers, which is the Communities for Partners or Partners for Communities, which administers the LIHEAP program, the Low Income Heating and Electricity Assistance Program. They are putting together how many people in Templeton, based upon their application history, might be eligible for a grant if we used 100% of poverty, 125, or 150. And they have expressed interest in administering that for us. They would get the applications. They would give us a sheet that says we've reviewed the financials. This person is eligible under this
exactly. Yeah.
definition, check, make a payment to the Templeton Municipal Light Plant. Because I'm selfish, I'd rather pay the money to the light plant than to a fuel oil carrier in Gardner. So we're gonna work through these and try to develop that kind of approach and policy. But I do want you to know it's gonna take some time.
Yeah. What was the
Because-
body again that you just described? You lost me at the end when you were just saying money goes to the light plant, but I thought you were talking about a council that
So
would
there's-
specifically look
there's-
at these
there's
things
the,
and say.
Partners for Community, which
Okay.
administer the federal and state LIHEAP program, which is the Heating and Electricity Assistance
Yep.
Program. So they've agreed to take all the
I
applications.
got what you're saying now, and then pay
Tell
it on their
us.
behalf.
So
Okay.
the only administration we'll have is to set up the program,
Mm-hmm,
need to do it anyways,
mm-hmm,
set up the agreement with the Partners for Community,
mm-hmm.
cut the checks when the approved slip comes in. We hope to spend about $10,000 a year that way,
Okay.
which will eat into the backlog, but give us something we can sustain for a number of years.
Yeah.
So that's the approach that we're following on some of these. I just wanted to give you a quick oversight into it. It's not gonna be easy. You're probably looking at well over a year.
It's the right
Before
direction,
any of this can be
coming up with a
straightened out.
method to expend these things, like the indigent, unmarried indigent woman, that's the Haskell Fund, and that's sitting on, that's $54,000.
Yeah.
Pine Grove.
So I think it'd be great to see even $2,000 of that go to somebody's light bill. You know what I mean? Or $200 of it,
Well,
however it
we're-
can
we're probably
ultimately
just-
be.
We have to work this out, but we'll
Yeah, of
probably
course.
look at
Pine
a
Grove.
maximum that approximates what the LIHEAP program does. So we're following as closely, because they're administering it. So the closer we can follow what they do, remember, $300 is only 33 people.
Mm-hmm.
But the payments would go to the light plant.
Right.
Yep.
That's the
That's
theory of the
being
moment,
responsible.
Right.
okay?
Yeah, yeah. No, I love it. I think it's great. Thank you.
So we wanted to give you an update on that.
Thanks.
And on the donation accounts, they are what they are. The money comes in, we spend it as we can.
I noticed that there were some that I would have questions on, like Pine Grove or whatever, is that, like, this was actually, you got it stamped right there, so, like, I can do one for one, the Haskell,
Some of them may be donations. The donations in the trust accounts are kept separate
okay,
on your sheets.
got it,
And we'll have one for the donation accounts as
Yep.
well. But the trust funds are the ones that are the stickiest to sort out and that need some formal policy
right.
behind them.
And do one or both go to town meeting for, like, how you're spending them, or?
At this point, only the, as far as we've sorted out, only the Rice Trust has to go to town meeting.
Okay. All right,
Okay?
I think we got revenue projection sheet that Will wanted to talk about next, that's the one,
Yeah, we kind of went through that. We just talked verbally about it. But this is a good segue into the recap, because Will asked about the bond lead.
Yeah.
And then he asked about how the debt exclusion
Yep.
came to be. So, Adam, if you can distribute those quickly, please. We may have some extra copies here. If not, if someone could let me know, and I'll email stuff to Jeff, or if one of you can save stuff for
Yeah, email's
Jeff, I'd
always, I'm
appreciate it.
happy to look at,
Probably not.
not waste paper and look at stuff electronically.
So I'm gonna start a little bit out of order. Let's go directly to Mr. Spring's question. I'm gonna ask you to go to what I believe is the fourth page. It looks like this. And it's called the DE1.
yep,
We have to show the Department of Revenue separate from our regular non-excluded debt. The debt payments that we have budgeted for and will be making out of the budget that are excluded from the limits of Proposition 2.5. You'll see the regional high school, last year, this is the last year for that. When the town approved the sewer projects, it agreed to eat some of those in the general fund, but it did exclude them. So these are expiring over the next period of years. We have $634,000. For those of you who were with us last year or observed any of last year, those would be in your budget books. We prepare in the budget book the non-excluded debt, and then we prepare a schedule for excluded debt, so you can see them. Because I need to see them because that's how I get the revenue projections right. I can only have in revenue the actual payments. I can only have in revenue debt excluded revenue for debt that is truly debt excluded and that I'm actually making the payments for. DOR needs to see those line up spot on. So we have $634,376 scheduled towards the elementary school and police station. So we have a payment due at the end of this month. We have rolled those notes, $16.6 million, until February of this year, at which time we will have another interest payment due. And then we will take a portion of that permanent, but we'll pay it down. So of the 16.6, let's for a moment say we're gonna take 10.4 million permanent. We'd have roughly 400,000 that we would pay down and then actually borrow 10 million, because the first payment won't be due until your next fiscal year. In terms of going permanent, we need a credit rating. We expect to get within the next 2 weeks, we're hoping. The water department, remember, they may be independent statutorily, but they still have to be on our books. And we can't complete our audit till we get their audit. So the plan is December 1, we get their audit. Our audit is completed by January 1. That's the plan. We have a credit rating within 30 days. We do our permanent bond offering, takes 15 days. By February 15, I have the final bonds in place to take out the whatever we're gonna go permanent on, and we roll the balance into the next fiscal year. We did borrow $9 million as well last night. The board authorized the borrowing of $9 million last night. That is for 1 year. So we'll have borrowed on the schools about 23.6 millions of dollars. We're about $3 million under budget in total so far. We're gonna hope that that continues. Then as we get into May or June of next year, we'll do any subsequent borrowings that we need. You have to understand that we can't just borrow money and have it sit there. The IRS regulations require that we spend monies, and I forget the exact percentages, so much within 6 months, so much within 12 months, so much within 18 months. And if we aren't spending on that burn rate, we can be penalized, have to calculate the arbitrage that we earned in excess of their regulations. Send them the calculations, they send us a nasty gram, we send them a check. That is where I get the number of the 1,488,000 that should marry up against what was on the revenue sheets.
It doesn't. You've got on the revenue sheet, your recommended is,
That's,
$1,780,000.
that's for next year, right, this is this year's,
Oh, okay.
okay? So next year, you have the 417 going off the books. I'll be adding that to the elementary school, which will bring us up to $1.1 million. And then I'll be adding roughly another $300,000 to bring us up to about $1.5 million in interest on the bands and interest in principal payments on the permanent
When we
bonds.
go for a regular bond for the 28 years for the school, even at $23 million, that's roughly at the interest rate that was projected by the presentation, number one. And number two, if you look at the Southwest scale that they have and what the interest rate would be for the lowest grade for an A rating for this community, you're talking anywhere from 2.95% to about 3 point something percent. and that's an estimate, basically. That end up being, like I said, about 1.1 to 1.2 million dollars a year as debt exclusion.
Yep, yep. I used 25 years. I used 5%. And I think you know, all of this is best guessing right now. The interest rate pictures changed, not only due to changes at the federal, but at the income tax rate. Before, if I was earning 8% and in a 30% tax bracket, I wanted to net 5.6%. Well, guess what? Now I'm at a 20% tax bracket. I want to net 6.4%. I mean, it's all relative. They always want to net on a exempt bond the same or more than they would have netted on a taxable bond. So I think you'll be at about $1.45 million plus or minus. We'll see.
Unfortunately, the interest rate is also going up, as you're well aware.
Yeah, that's why I used 5.
The Fed is looking at another increase now, and it looks like by the time that we end up going for a bond, it will drive the interest rates up substantially, because they're looking at
25
another,
basis
they're
points.
looking at another 3 basis
Point
points
25.
for next year.
0.25.
0.25.
Yeah. I mean,
What, 0.25%, 25 basis points, yeah.
right, so, well, I understand what you're saying, but, I mean, if you could predict what the Fed's gonna do for the next 5 years, or what the market's gonna do, you can make rock solid decisions, but, and you could retire next week, but, I mean, you have to go with what it is.
We're not gonna be anywhere in the A's, you know, I'd be happy with a BAA bond rating, because they're not just gonna look at where you are today,
Where you're
Was that with
they're
Moody's?
gonna look at where you've been and what you've been doing to stay on track for the
Was
future.
it, with that, are you talking about getting a BAA from Moody's?
Yeah, I think you.
I think they stopped, my understanding is they stopped doing that for municipalities. The lowest rating that they give is A.
I'll go back, I may be thinking of the other service, but in any event, the equivalent of a BAA today. So, you know, 25 years, 5, we're gonna try to phase this in over 3 years, so there's no spike, so that some of the excluded debt, like the schools, is dropping off as we're bringing some more of it on. Okay? So does that answer your question on where I got the
That's part of it.
1,000,007?
What about the police station? What's the, looking as far as that $2.3 million? There was some discussion as to the length of that going out for a bond. And I mean, depending on the length of that bond, is what the debt exclusion hits every year. And that could be anywhere from $150,000 to $500,000, depending on what year.
As I sit today, you're probably looking at a 25-year level principal and interest. The original plan was optimistic. It didn't take into account the fact that you didn't have audits, wouldn't have the audits in time.
So you're looking at 25 years.
Possibly. We can also do a blended bond in which the school's 25, but the police is 15. It's a single bond, lower costs of flotation. And you just distribute the payments accordingly between the elements of the bond. But we've got to keep inching into this. I think this is best we know right now. And we will not get all the MSBA money back immediately. Some of it will be sitting out there. They hold back 5% all the way. They do not pay you anything for change orders until the very end. When they come in, they do their final audits, they do their releases. You need to think that once we're all buttoned up with the contractor, you are 18 to 24 months before you're settled out with MSBA. Okay?
And they've been going on schedule, no change orders
Well, we've had some change orders, but we're probably, I would be uncomfortable telling you the total we've spent so far, because I just don't have that one
I
committed to
understand.
memory, but change orders to date are only around $200,000.
That's not
We're
bad.
up out of the ground, steel is up, roof is on, we're getting pretty close to being weather tight.
Yeah.
This is where many of the things that can go wrong really go wrong. When you're in the soils, you're finding out what's under the ground you couldn't see. The hazardous waste materials.
Right.
So only $200,000 in change orders so far. I'm really very pleased with the work that the architect did on those specs. They really were
Good.
excellent. Police station, we're not quite as lucky.
Yeah, we met with the
Didn't have
chief
as,
the other
didn't have
night.
as well-developed a set of plans and specs. Pay me now, pay me later, you know, it's. So, if we're okay on that, I'd like to go into the rest of the recap sheet.
Yep.
Yes, please.
Okay, recap sheet is thought of as, you know, a few single pages. It's actually, with all the supporting documents, 25-plus pages, some of which is controlled by the state. We cannot enter the values for overrides. They have to get a certified vote from the town clerk, and then they put it in for us. So on the first page, this shows you the maximum levy limit that we have. For fiscal 2019, you take the 28 levy limit, the 9,062,000. You add 2.5% of that, then you add your new growth in, which for us was 104,000, as compared to our estimate of 65,000. Again, we use that 3-year rule and try to stay somewhat conservative. The 470 was the override. That's the one the state has to plug in. We can't do it. We have to send them all the certifications of the town meeting vote, and then they put that in. So that shows that for the levy limit within the confines of Prop 2.5, on the operating side, we can raise 9,863,059. We then add debt exclusion payments, and that's that fourth page or so there that I showed you and went over. So we can raise this year 11,351,618. The next page is, we have to show them all the appropriations, where the money was coming from, to get down to how much will be raised by taxes. Your budget does a whole bunch of double counting, because the way you've set your accounts up, I pay all the debt for the sewer department, so it's carried in the general fund budget. Then I send a bill to the sewer department, which carries all the debt payments. So if you add up all your budgets, they're not true, because they've got some double counting going on. We tried to make a little progress on that, but that wasn't gonna happen. So we'll have to keep going with the system.
It couldn't happen the way that you were,
Wouldn't happen.
right.
It's in
I
other
understand what you're saying.
communities, but for the short term here, it's simply not gonna happen. The next page is we show the state all of the estimated receipts that we have. You're gonna notice some check marks there, because I've already kind of warned the staff, they're aware of this, but I remind them every year. If our estimate is 10% up or 10% below the actual of the prior fiscal year, it's very common for DOR to say, how come? Well, we had a rate increase. Okay, send us proof. Well, we decided we're gonna be conservative, and here's how we do it. Oh, okay. And so the miscellaneous recurring, those are in simplest terms, the transfers from the several enterprise accounts. We pay the bonds, we send them a bill, they send us the check. We pay all the health insurance, we send them a bill, they send us a check. That 8 is all of those different transactions. Now, only item of note, licenses and permits, down 150,000. We issued a permit for the elementary school. I'm now kind of regretting that we cut the price of it, but the building permit was only 150,000. We cut it by about 2/3. We could have collected a 450,000.
The miscellaneous non-recurring, just so folks know what those are, could you go through those?
Okay, so let me just get back to it, please. Miscellaneous non-recurring. Okay, so that's just basically stuff that just can't go anyplace else. We don't have an account for it. That can be things like closing tailings. It can be things like a FEMA reimbursement. There's a wide variety of things that can be.
What was the first one you said? Tailings?
Tailings? Tailings are stale checks that have been sitting out there for a substantial period of time. There's a process we have to go through. Last year, we closed tailings in the amount of $37.40. We go through a process, we mail them a letter, we mail them an affidavit. They can send the affidavit back of, nope, I got paid, don't know what's wrong with your records. Check, done, we just take it off the books. Or, nope, you didn't pay me, send me a new check. And at the end, there's a process by which if we can't reach people, we can close those to the books of the town.
Got it, thank you.
Insurance payments, for claims or refunds, things like that. It's basically stuff that doesn't have a perfect fit under all the other revenue accounts. So, once we have our DE1, we add that to the maximum. We know how much money we can raise legally. We know how much money we need to raise. We know how much money we have coming in from all of our other revenue sources. That gets us down to what we have to raise by taxation. In this case, our $11,348,000. That's distributed across the various classes. And the tax rate next year is projected to be $17.24. That is subject to final DOR approval. It could change. It is never absolutely certain until they sign off. But it has not been my experience that if we've done our homework right and worked it through, that it ever changes by very much. This would be a 52-cent tax increase over the rate of last year. Do remember, the tax rate has nothing to do with your tax bill. It's the tax rate times your new value. If values go down and rates go up, there are times when the tax bill on a person's house is exactly the same.
Sure.
The tax rate in my community has changed over the 10 years from $8.62 to about $7.82, a little up and down. And the tax bill on my house in 10 years has changed approximately 10% over those 10 years. So that's the recap sheet. I think those are the 5 basic. Happy to send you the full 25 plus when it's all done, but truthfully, the rest of it's all just supporting documentation. Any questions on that? Because I know that's a lot, but I try to keep it as straightforward as I could.
Typically, the advisory had gotten those 25-plus pages as a copy, and I think there should be either Jeff has it or it's in the filing cabinet downstairs for us to reference as to what.
Happy to send it to you once it's complete, if you'd like. We'll send it out, if you'll make a note of that, please, Adam. We'll send that out to you electronically, once it's, assume 2 weeks. The plan, hope is to have, the rate within 2 weeks. Have that to our new vending company, our new billing company, and to have the tax bills out on or about December 15. We are changing companies. There will be a newsletter explaining it. We are going to the consolidated single Q3 and Q4 bill. You won't get a bill for the third quarter, and then a couple months later, get a bill for the fourth quarter. And I thought I had,
I think like, yeah, half the year was like that.
you may recall, can you just move this out real quick? I don't,
Maybe that's.
you may recall during the budget process last year, I discovered that the billing company was only charging us postage. They'd only been charging us postage for a number of years. The town was aware of it. The department head charged with it decided to just let it ride. I decided that, much as I love the savings, I couldn't morally do that. So we had some monies in the budget, and we will read that at your leisure. We will begin paying, and will fit into the budget. We will be eliminating the return envelopes. That will be explained. We'll be putting in a two-sided 8.5 by 11 newsletter in the new billing, explaining the changing, why we're not using the envelopes, and then some other articles of things going on in the town.
Getting rid of the envelopes because there just wasn't,
On the property side, I can't remember, we have
they just weren't being used.
about a third of the real estate bills are being paid using the return envelopes. The balance, they're being paid by the mortgage companies.
Right.
People are paying online. They're using their own envelopes. They're bringing them into us, thinking they're doing a great thing.
That's how
that we
they
can
interact.
reuse them. We end up throwing them in the recycling bucket.
Yep. Does the Pay Gold online allow for payment in that method?
Oh, sure, you can pay
Okay.
your real estate, you can pay your sewer,
Yep.
and you can pay your excise online.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
lot.
if you
a
wanna
lot you
pay-
can
Well,
Water or light, you have to go to a different portal.
Right.
my question about that, and it's been a while, but I believe I tried to pay my personal property tax online a couple of years ago. There's a substantial fee to do so. Is that
Because you
still
are
the case?
using a credit card.
Okay,
There's if I recall correctly, and I could be wrong, if you're paying with an ACH, a transfer from your checking account,
Yep.
I think it's only 25 or 50 cents.
It's a quarter.
quarter, okay.
25 cents?
Yep.
Oh, so
Okay.
you have to take it
It's,
to-
it's the credit card, because the credit card companies, we want to get 100
They pay a
cents of our
percentage, I
dollars.
understood, sure.
So that convenience fee is charged by the credit card
Okay,
company.
so I can do it through the bank, okay.
But you can do it through a ACH, a transfer from
Yep.
your checking
Are
account.
those,
Okay, perfect, thank
are
you.
those links online?
Yeah, actually, if you go right to templeton.org, it's first page.
Okay.
I always felt like it was an extra step to do that, like you had to know to do it. Like, it's not like you go to the town, or, I don't know, can you go to the town page and just go right to it?
Yeah, so it's the
Okay.
first, so this is the
Online.
homepage, yeah.
Yeah,
One
we're
of the other-
rebuilding the front, we're rebuilding the site, but it'll still remain pretty prominent on the
That's good.
front page.
One of the other issues that we've seen in the past, and I think we brought it up, and sometimes it doesn't, it seems to go away or not, is the fact that real estate bills for separate pieces of property are set in separate envelopes for the same household. Same thing with excise.
Yep.
Because they're in different names, they're still going to the same household. That, to me, is an expense that the town should not.
Globe Direct has promised that they have the capacity to merge multiple billings into fewer envelopes. They are relatively new to this business. They have about 65 municipal clients at this point. They have a rep in Worcester. Will, like any vendor's promises, we'll look forward to how well they deliver on those promises.
Yeah.
But that is something that they have assured us they can do.
Yeah, because every time I see my real estate bills, or my excise tax, two separate envelopes coming to the house on either the same day or different days, it drives me crazy and saying, why can't we get one? It saves us money. I
Excise
can't be
tax-
the only one.
Excise tax bills, I want to be clear, if you have a car and it's in your name, and your wife has a car and you've titled that in her name, those will be two separate bills, even if they're going to the same address. We're not going to get into trying to sort that kind of thing out. But if it's, Carter and Karen Terenzini, 67 St. Moritz, Carter and Karen Terenzini, 18 Hebron,
Well, it's not, that's
Those will
not the
be
case. It's my wife's name comes first on one car and mine comes first on the other, though it's joint ownership.
I'm just gonna look at, it's slow, steady progress, By the inch, it's a cinch, by the yard, it's darn hard. We'll keep trying, Will, but they've assured us they can do that. We'll see how well they deliver.
Any thought about, so for example, you can do for your phone bill, for your cable bill, just put in your information and it just pays it when it's due?
I think that would be difficult with excise and real estate bills.
It's not a fixed fee, so understood, but from a convenience perspective, you'd never forget it anyway, and it needs to be paid. So it's not a nice to have, it's a must to have. And again, they're just throwing out a crazy thought.
Maybe I can chat with you about that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
offline, because frankly, I'm not understanding exactly what you're saying to me.
Yeah, no, understood.
I mean, certainly anything that we can do to improve, to make it easier for people to pay their bills and to improve our cash flow. We now scan all the checks in-house.
Yep.
We don't have stacks of checks going to the bank anymore.
Right.
They're scanned, and it's 24-hour clearance, basically. If we get them in the right time of day, they're cleared the next morning. I wanted to, I'll keep just one of those, please. This is the budget versus actual. Just give me one of them, please, just a couple things I just want to draw your attention to.
This is the one that was emailed earlier.
It is?
Oh,
I think so.
is that that?
This has all of the transfers that were authorized at the Fall Town meeting, so you're gonna see that stabilization, operation stabilization, be at that $400,000 plus level. You're gonna see the capital be at that $100,000 plus level. Everything's running pretty well. And as always, when the quarterly report is delivered, the accountant makes note of any accounts that are just really out of whack. So for instance, in the first month of the year, we pay the retirement $625,000. We pay workers' comp, property liability, another $100,000. So in the first month, we're really blowing through a pretty good portion of that budget. And when the town accountant puts her report together, she tries to draw your attention to anything that's really kind of out of the ordinary.
So something that if you watched our meetings, I've talked about, have you ever thought of having the different departments give you a spend plan for the year?
Have I ever thought of it? Yes. Have I ever implemented it anywhere? No, I haven't. And the reason is, I haven't yet sorted out, I'd have to take that spend plan and on a month-by-month basis, because these budget reports can't account for it.
Right.
They don't have an opportunity for me to enter what I think we should spend in X month by department. So it would have to be done manually. And not all the communities I've worked in have necessarily had the sophistication to do that.
Okay.
And then I have to think about all the other things on their plate. And do I want to ask them to spend 4+ hours or whatever it would take to do that for the output? So that's why I kind of attack it from the other side. which is just trying to, every month, have you seen the reconciliation sheets we use at all?
So,
Can you just make a note that we get them one of those, please? Every month, on or about November 10, I sit down, I review these, I ask any questions, I have to sign off on it, and then we have to reconcile with all the departments, and we ask the selectmen to sign that by the end of the month. We'll get you a copy of that so you at least understand.
Okay.
And then at the end of the quarter, I make sure the accountant draws your attention to things that are out of line.
right.
And from a,
That
you
was
know,
helpful.
labor input versus output value, if we had everything else done, I'd be happy to
I-
chat with you about
I
it.
know where you're going, so.
Okay. The only other thing I want to bring to your attention, that I think is of note, is the budget had 13,000 in it for cleaning catch basins. That simply has not worked and is not going to work in the near term. It was based upon a belief that we could get the basins cleaned for about $13 a piece. 1,000 basins, 13. The problem is, the town is so far behind in the basin cleaning, has many deteriorated basins, and has continued with equipment that has not allowed us to complete our sweeping on time. So the cost to clean those basins has actually been in the $22 to $28 range. We're not gonna work our way out of that in the near term. So the highway director has proposed, he's found a used piece of equipment he can acquire for about $9,500. We have $7,000 left we haven't expended on the cleaning contract. We're gonna be proposing to the board on the 28th of this month that we acquire this piece of equipment over the next couple of years, as we try to eliminate our sanding program and move to a different snow and ice control method. If we can get these things all caught up, that there will be, towards the end of this piece of equipment's lifetime, we still think there's an opportunity to switch to contracting. We still think it's the right way to go as opposed to buying a piece of equipment, but the plan just, it didn't work. And I wanted you to be aware of that. Pay raises went out, those budget transfers were made in the general fund.
That's good.
If there's any questions on one of the other funds where the transfers have not been made.
All the controversies behind us, everyone got their raises.
The one department that continues to refuse to submit the evaluations, no, sir, has not gotten their raises and cannot, will not until.
One person, they're doing,
3 people,
okay.
one department. And as soon as they comply with the policy with respect to evaluations being done, and then raises being based upon the merits of performance and internal equity. Can't pay a person down here performing this job more than a person here doing that kind of job. Happy to get that matter behind us.
How often do they meet, the sewer commission?
I believe it's once a month.
Okay.
Took more of your time than I would have liked. but I think we
That's all right, I
covered
think
quite
it
a
was
bit.
all time well spent. I definitely appreciate both
Tried
of
to
you coming
anticipate
in.
all your questions, get you everything
Yeah.
coming up, leave you with a few things to think about. And if there's something else that's come up during the evening, be happy to take a few more minutes of your time and try to address it.
Anyone else? Anything for either Carter
you
or
for-
Adam?
No, thank you both for coming.
Yeah, appreciate it very much.
Oh, my apologies. Have all of you met Adam, actually? Okay. We're coming into the season. I told him that during the normal time of year, he should expect to work 45 to 50 hours, and during
still
the budget
smiling.
season. And during the budget season, he should expect to work 60 to 70
Yep.
hours. So we're coming into that season.
At some point, I thought that you were gonna come to us and, try and appropriate a cot for him to sleep on, because he was talking about he has about an hour to go.
No, that's on him.
Yeah.
That's his. When I told him when he got the job, I said, keep track of your mileage, we'll pay you, and his ears perked up. He said, my commuting mileage? I said, oh, no. I said,
Thanks,
by the way,
gentlemen.
we, if you go to any meetings, we pay you from your house or here, whichever is closer. Anything else I can do for you this evening?
No, you said the purchase, the 9,500 for a piece of equipment, what do they need? Is it like an attachment that goes onto a
It's a
truck?
full catch basin cleaner. It's used. It's been inspected by Bob Sochick.
Yeah,
And the mechanic, what they think we'll get 5 years or so out of it. We need to get to a position where we know where all the catch basins are, where they're in reasonably good repair. We're getting the streets swept on time. Kind of important to sweep the streets before the rains wash the sands in. And we have changed our method of snow and ice control. It takes a while for the payback to happen, but once we can get that done, then we probably can into the.
it'll work
low
until you
to
can
mid-teens.
contract it out. Okay,
That still remains my goal.
okay.
A new catch basin cleaner, we lucked upon this one, is in the 175 range with a 20-year lifespan, which is $8,000. And we really need to get out of the, patching stuff upon time. New truck is in, and the other new truck won't be here till February.
How is the ice being, on the roads being addressed that's happened in the last couple of days?
I'd have to ask the Public Works
Because
Director.
I mean,
I don't think they've done anything.
it does-
Yeah, I don't think so either.
When there's gonna be a quick changeover in the temps,
Yeah, I think that the most they could do is either treat it or put out cones or something, so people know not to fly over it.
we do have some problem drainage areas we're trying to work with town council on. When you get a chance to chat with Bob during his budget presentation, I
Yeah,
think you'll be very pleased by his knowledge, his expertise,
yeah, we've
and
got
his-
him
his
next week.
thoughts.
For capital planning.
Yes.
We got him next week.
Okay,
Cool, thanks,
if
gentlemen.
that's it, thank you for your time. Hopefully, we've addressed anything.
Yep.
If during the balance of your meeting, something pops up, just send us an email. We'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Great, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Carter.
very much.
Yeah, have a safe drive back.
You too. All right, next on our agenda, we've got the budget versus actual report. I think Jeff has it on there to see if there's any discussion. I certainly didn't have any time to consume
No.
the
I'll make a
latest one.
motion, actually, because we just got this one, to table it till the next meeting. I mean, we haven't really looked
Second.
at this per se.
Okay, there's a motion to table it, and we
Yep, till
have a
next
second.
meeting.
Yep. Will/Amy. Any discussion? Okay, hearing no discussion. What'd you say?
I said no discussion.
No discussion, okay. Tony?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
And I'm yes too, so we're gonna table that. And that is at 7:59, 19:59 hours. Okay, next we have the minutes from pre-town. We'll do two separate. We have pre-town and then our meeting of November 1st. I'll entertain motions for.
Make a motion to accept the pre-town.
Second.
Tony, Amy. Any discussion whether, I think they
They're pretty self-explanatory.
were good, yeah?
Yeah.
I wasn't here, so I would have had discussion. There's one thing that I would end up discussing, but
Right,
since
but-
I wasn't here,
Right, so you abstaining from that one.
well, I'm abstaining from the vote, but my concern was that we had gone to a town warrant to end up giving the administrator the ability that they can end up contracting with the department heads. To me, he's already done that, and he's already violated something that we haven't even given them. So, as an example, there was a contract that's signed by the treasurer.
But I think that failed. But you're saying that he wanted it, he didn't get it, but he's doing it anyway, is what you're saying?
He got it already. It's been there for well over a year.
Yeah. So, I mean, your issue is the town meeting takeaways, that it wasn't discussed, and so it should have been in minutes.
No, my issue is that he was doing it, and now he got his hand caught in his cookie jar, so to speak, and trying to take it and end up backpedaling, and the town says no.
Yeah.
And it's pretty-
And it was political because the sewer department is the one who stopped it.
Yes.
But as far as what the current motion is for discussion, and it doesn't have anything to do with the minutes, though, Will?
No,
Okay.
I just, that's part of you accepted it, and
Yep.
that's what my pushback was on that.
Right, yeah, we did, we had some discussion on the town meeting takeaways and what each person thought about it. Any other discussion on the minutes? Tony,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Lee,
Abstain.
Deb,
Yes.
Will,
Abstain.
and I am a yes, and that passes at 8:02. Okay, and we've got the that was for the pre-town? Oh, that was for the pre-town.
Mhm.
I see what you're saying, Will. But as you said, in point, all right, so this next vote is for the November 1st. That's where we had the discussion afterwards, I'm sorry. I thought you were, I thought you weren't referring to the pre-town meeting minutes. I just had them backwards. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the November 1st Advisory Committee meeting.
So moved.
Okay, we have a
Second.
motion, we have a second. Any discussion of those minutes? That was 2 pages emailed out, so everyone had a copy of those. Hearing no discussion. Tony?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Will?
Abstain.
And I am a yes, so that passes at 8:03. Okay, the next that we have on there is the discussion of the Collins memo, which I think we've tabled for a few meetings now. I'm not really sure if we have a concerted, like, what are the issues that we're trying to discuss, or, I would rather have everybody in attendance if we're gonna discuss the Collins memo, or whether it's even still something that we need to
Motion
talk
on
about.
that?
What's that?
Are you looking for a motion on it?
No, I just, what are we trying to achieve with,
Since we've deferred it a few times.
yeah, we
kinda
have.
like some time to go back over it.
Yeah, I've been looking at it, I don't know what we're trying to achieve. There we go. I think it had to do I'm almost not remembering why we keep going through it. I think it had to do with the bylaws.
It's about vacancies in a body, it looks like.
It's mainly about the bylaws and
Yeah,
how they pertain to us.
Right.
I think we should have something a little bit more prepared, like whether it's the actual document with a write-up or something, or whatever the issues are. I just don't know how.
Well, I'm gonna save my comments to members' comments on the bylaws. And it pertains to that also.
I don't even see it.
What's that? Tony, what's that?
No, I was just looking for the Collins memo itself, and I don't even see it.
I had to dig, but I've got it. I think we could resend it. We can table this to the next meeting.
8:29.
The next
You want
time
a
we meet?
motion? You looking for a motion on that?
I think so.
Okay, I'll make a motion to table Collins memo discussion.
Second.
Oh, okay.
Maybe, this is the other thing I was looking for though.
Yeah, I think we needed a little bit more structure to talk about it. Tony,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
and Will,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. Let's table this to our next meeting, which is the 6th. So we're gonna table this until December 6th.
There's one more Thursday in this month, isn't there?
Yeah, but it's first and third, right? So we met
Yeah.
on the 1st.
Yeah.
This is the
Right,
3rd.
And the odd months, we've actually got
Yeah,
another
we do
meeting
the fifth,
scheduled
yeah.
for,
So it'll be the 29th.
if you look
Be
at
the
the schedule.
29th? Okay.
So,
Is that on the calendar? Do we have that?
I think it's 29th.
So I'll have to send that out again.
Yeah, I don't have.
It's not in there?
29th.
Yeah,
No.
so is that a double meeting, the 29th and then the 6th?
Yes.
Well, it is,
Yeah.
but just because the way November's set up.
Okay. All right, I'll send that out again. So we're gonna talk about this on the 29th, is what we're saying.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. That's good.
Once a quarter, you get an extra meeting.
Yay us.
That's not a bad thing, because
Right.
sometimes you need that extra meeting.
I'm gonna make sure I send that out too.
Okay.
All right, next we have is pay the pre-town advertisement bill. Now, I'm not sure what Jeff had for that. I don't know if that's the one that we already sent, or if it's to deal with this 3350 that probably got sent back out by Kelly.
Right, so why don't we deal with what you have and then can't do what we can't do, we can wait, it'll have to wait.
Well, should we do
Anything else?
anything before clarifying with Jeff?
Well, we already paid it, so this is something that we already voted on to pay, right?
Yep.
So
You received that from Kelly?
this was in our mailbox. So this came back from Gatehouse Media to the advisory committee. So Kelly's issue was that we sent out payment to Gardner News, and that now, it's now not, it's not Gardner News anymore. So I don't know if they rejected payment
It's
or
crazy,
otherwise.
cause it would have crossed, like, the things would have
It's
crossed.
crossed in the mail, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I wonder if that is a fresh bill.
That's happened before.
Right.
It's been approved, we put it in, submitted it, and we get a bill from them again because of the delay in payment through the town hall.
So isn't
Even after the
Kelly the
approval.
one that makes the payment?
say that again?
Isn't Kelly the one, Jeff submits our approval to pay it to Kelly and she pays it?
Correct.
So-
That's how I understand it.
All right, so then,
I'm gonna see, I'm
so
gonna pull
I
up the
think we need some
email.
more information on that
Yeah.
to say, okay, did Gardner News kick the payment back?
Is it for the same amount as
It
last time?
doesn't,
3350.
No?
So,
Well, that's-
I mean, does somebody just
that's
need to call
actually cheaper
Gardner
than-
News and find
my
out what
God.
we owe them? Or
That's
if we
cheaper
do?
than past years, believe it or not, folks.
Yeah, it is, I feel like this
la-
is
Last year,
something else, because I feel like it was in the $70 range, like 65 or
it was
$70.
$63, $65 in past years.
So I feel like this might be something
was
else.
this for the notice that Jeff put in for right after the pre-town meeting, or for the pre-town meeting?
Yeah. Well, the pre-town meeting is, no, it's usually, it was in the
Yeah, maybe they-
$60
maybe
range.
they cut us a slack.
through the Gardner News.
No, if anything, it's probably an assessment for being late or something.
No, it's only 30
Well, we
days.
were late with that payment, weren't we?
Yeah, we shouldn't have been.
I'm trying to find Kelly's email.
Okay,
It could be the fact that the last bill came from Gardner News, and that company is just taking over and doing the billing a little bit differently.
I mean,
Accountant@templeton1.org is Kelly.
Do you have
I
it?
can see it right here.
What did she say?
2 weeks ago to Gardner News.
Oh, I don't have the one
No,
about the
she's
garden. I
just
thought you were
looking
just
for
looking
email
for
address.
her email address, sorry.
It comes up in mine as Kelly. I just can't find, I don't know if I deleted it or what I did with it. But I just wanted to see if that offered any, idea on why we got this back.
No, it didn't say anything.
All right, so Jeff had it as an agenda item for
just says-
paying the pre-town advertisement bill. I don't have any materials. He didn't email me to say, hey, I'm not gonna be there. This is what this is about, so.
He actually has to put in a form along with the bill, okay?
Yeah.
And
We have to sign
I
I've got
know that-
nothing, so I
know
think
in
we should
past
just-
years, we have kept the copy. If you don't have that, it's a little hard for us to.
So,
I think we have to
so
sign
here's,
it.
Yeah.
here's Kelly's email, and it's very nebulous. We got a bill from the Gardner News, we got a bill for Gardner News that has been bought out, which doesn't really make sense. The new name for the company is Gatehouse New England. I have updated the vendor system, so please don't put Gardner News on your cover sheets going forward.
I suspect that that's what this is.
Yeah, I
Can
think
you-
that she got the bill, and then they've got notice that the Gardner News has been bought out. So,
Yeah, that's really poor English.
The original bill could have been sent out by the Gardner News, and the new company took over and did the billing after.
So,
Again.
so maybe what we wanna find out is, did we get double billed?
right, or is this a different charge because now they're a different company and they charge more?
So do we just call
Let's just
Kelly?
table this.
Like, how do we get that
I think,
information?
She's not gonna have the answer.
No, I
No,
think
but somebody will have to call the
somebody will have to call the Gardner
somebody's
News.
got, yeah, I mean,
Like,
that's,
what's
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
that's her
we've got-
job.
So who
This
calls
is a
the
bill
company?
The sales
town.
rep is listed on this,
Recall them?
so.
And I
So
don't-
that- I mean, it's a-
Debbie,
Account will call either.
Oh,
Bilodeau,
that's
That's
interesting.
my
it's a
number
yeah,
on here.
okay.
It's a bill to the town, so I think
I
that,
think that individual does that.
that she should do that.
Should they?
and Find out, okay, is this
It's
really
another
a bill?
question.
No, it's her job.
all right.
Well,
So for
The
us,
accountant,
for,
I guess. Yeah.
So what do you
for our
guys?
purposes tonight, we'll just, we'll send a request for information to Kelly to say, hey, is this what we owe right now?
And make
Send
sure that we didn't get double
RFI
counted.
To Kelly.
So will you do that?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
Number one, I'm gonna ask Jeff, did he have any other materials, or did it have to do with this? Did he put it on the agenda anticipating that that's what it was about?
Because he's actually got a form that he has to submit to the accountant along with the bill and the
Right.
signatures.
I feel like that's
I'm
why
sure
we
you've
got that
seen-
email.
I'm sure you've all seen it when the bill was discussed last time.
Yeah, we did.
And I'll ask Jeff.
Didn't it get
Okay.
delayed 'cause we
So we
didn't
don't need a
sign?
motion, or we're not gonna table it. I'll take care of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, he had also, on the last agenda item, other than the regular, like, new business stuff, he had a chapter 90 update. I'm not
we
sure
got
if
that.
that's what we got from Carter, or if we're supposed
thought
to be
that's-
talking about anything else.
I thought that's what we got from
Yeah, I think we
Carter.
already covered it.
Okay. All right,
Either that, or you can table it and ask him the next time around.
yep.
Well, we can bring that up under older new business. If he has something to say.
All right, is there anything about the chapter 90 briefing that we got that that we're concerned about? I mean, he talked about a new system for prioritization and, not addressing capital, chapter 90 items, but basically the maintenance thereof. And how, basically the spend plan for how chapter 90's,
Right.
money gets expended.
Right.
Well, one of the things that you should be aware of, that chapter 90 money was used for the engineering design for Royalston Road. And that's where a lot of that's gone. So that's kind of, according to what he just gave you tonight, is totally different about payment of using chapter 90.
Well, I think what the Royalston Road was on one of the sheets I saw. I think what he's saying is, as we go forward, this is, if they think they're gonna get about 400,000 a year in chapter 90 money, this is the process this is how they're gonna spend it. 25% of this and 5%. I think that's what they're saying is this new iteration of chapter 90 fund, Royalston Road has already expended money. That this is going forward.
Well, there
this
may
is
be
how
some
we plan to
additional,
do it.
I'm just warning, there may be some additional monies that are going to have to be spent on chapter 90s. They came back a second time on that, if you go back in history.
I certainly wouldn't disagree with your background on that, but that's really something we have to deal with as it comes up.
Well, what I would say for the chapter 90 brief that we got, let's put it on the next agenda as homework for us to take a look at what he gave us in conjunction with the PowerPoint presentation that we already had. And let's talk about the impacts of the chapter 90 process change, because that's really what it is. It's a process change based on that expected $400,000 per year to say, we know we need much more than that. I want to get out of that business. Let's talk about the impacts on the budget for next time. So I'll put that as an agenda, recommended agenda item.
I don't know too much for roads now.
All right, and then, so next agenda, we got the Collins memo, impacts of chapter 90. We're gonna review the October,
Oh, yeah.
October 31st, budget versus actual. For the next meeting, let's talk about the standard operating procedures, and how we can kind of pull the like, right now, I think you're writing all that stuff, operating procedures.
The roles and responsibilities.
Yep.
I'll be right up front with you. Last 2.5 months, like I told you, has not been good for me.
Oh, yeah.
I have not touched that at all, other than.
Well, let's take
the
that
initial.
burden off you.
Well, I'd like to work with somebody because
Sure.
I have quite a bit of information from other communities for both the procedure that I pulled as well as for the roles and responsibilities. I would think that you wanna end up getting, instead of the next meeting, is somewhere at the end of December or beginning of January to get the roles and responsibilities, the document, in a little more in detail, because it, not only you have to take and end up putting something down, you have to take and end up indicating as to how it relates to our bylaws on that. Cause
Yeah.
you're referencing different stuff in the roles and responsibilities as it's spelled out in the bylaws.
Okay. We'll put that, we'll talk about the way forward for coming up with those products. And I can say, kind of going into the next agenda item as the member comments, most of the board went to the,
Well, I have some things for, you
yeah,
wanna
oh,
talk
I'm not
about
closing
agenda
out.
items.
Yeah, oh, okay. Well, I was gonna say, the conference that we went to kind of really did a lot for operating guide, what right looks like, so I think that really helped us out a lot. Agenda item, go ahead.
Right, I have a couple of suggestions. I have here a revenue and analysis and forecasting that was issued by Alan Tossi, the chairman of the Finance Committee of the Town of Arlington, back a number of years ago. This is one of the documents that we should look at as to looking at the actual revenues that, and the forecasting that was presented to us tonight. I mean, that's our responsibility to go ahead and do it separately. You shouldn't, well, that's jumping ahead, I'll talk about that. The other thing is upcoming, if you look at the MMA meeting that's in January, February, it's the investment policy for OPEB. I have a presentation here that I think that might be something prior to us, or whoever's going to that MMA meeting, is to take, we should be having a discussion as to how the towns is going about doing that. There's some criterias about that, there's some pros and cons as to how you go about that, and what's the benefits of having OPEB? That would need to be discussed.
Okay.
So those two things.
How do you have those? Do you want to do a presentation like on, do you have slides, or do you want to prepare something? Do you want us to prepare
Well, I could
something?
end up having the OPEB,
He doesn't have
it's a
it.
slide thing.
Okay, that looks like you got it from, so you got that from MMA?
Yes.
All right.
This is.
So we can put it on the
It may
screen.
not be on the the MMA website now.
Okay.
Since they're talking about doing a new one at
There's,
MMA.
there's so many tools on there.
Yeah.
I'll take a look for it. Okay,
And
so,
the revenue
Yep, doc
analysis.
review.
There is some new ones also, along with Mr. Tossi's.
okay,
I could, for the next meeting, we could end up making a copy of this. I can give that to Jeff and he can end up dispersing.
scan it in.
Because I only have paper copies of these. These weren't taken electronically.
what year was that?
2012.
This is 2012,
Arlington, 2012, okay,
and it's still pertinent today, believe it or not.
all right.
I
So-
mean, this guy,
Oh, I believe it. I was in a presentation with him, at the thing that we
impressive,
went
isn't
to. I mean, Arlington does some really great stuff.
he?
Northborough. that
He
guy,
is,
yeah.
he is a guru. He has been in that position for over 25 years.
30 years, he said.
And he's a great resource. I have talked to him many times. Unfortunate, I wasn't able to make this particular one. I really missed that because I found him to be very enlightening as to can end up getting some insight.
Yeah, it
as
was
to-
interesting. It was
And
great.
I've talked to him about the present, or I should say, the past issues that have transpired as far as the bylaw conflict and the committee in the past. I won't even tell you what he said, but that's another.
All right, so we got document review of the revenue and forecasting from Arlington, and then investment policy for OPEB, okay?
Yep.
And looks,
I got for comments, I'll save that for.
okay.
Okay.
Any other, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things for the next agenda, not including housekeeping stuff. Anything else?
The only thing I can recommend is that people go on the MMA and look at some of the documents and resources that they have there. Those would be good topics on some of them to have discussion at our meetings.
Mhm.
I mean, it's up to the rest of the members, but I think there's some good things that we could end up gleaming from those, at least the discussion, and
Huge.
having a presentation.
That's, I think, that's what we walked away with, was that there's a lot of stuff out there, and they really put a highlight
And
on
I'm
it.
sure Mr. Tossi talked about the fact that plagiarize.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
he did.
Did he not say that?
Yeah, he did.
Because it's already been written,
That's exactly what he said.
and you see some of the stuff that's been done by this community, that they have not taken advantage of that. They have gone out to other agencies and created policies, et cetera, when there was existing ones.
Any other agenda items?
No.
Okay.
I think
All right,
that's enough.
go around the horn, any member comments? Tony?
Nope.
Amy?
No.
Lee?
Nope.
Deb?
Nope.
Will?
You know I'm going to have them.
You said you did.
Absolutely. This is a document that well, it's a newspaper. FinCom kicks off budget season with all boards. Harvard, this is not the only community that does this. This is in the newspaper, folks. This is not something that's new. Why does it say just FinCom? Well, one of the things I want to take and end up pointing out is, I can understand that the selectmen have thrown it out to take and end up having us go through the budget at the same time as them. But in government, do you see in government, state government, federal government, even town governments, where you have the executive branch sitting down with the legislative branch, like he's being proposed on that Saturday, and going through the budget? When they propose that, they generally end up running running it in the method that they want, and not necessarily what the legislative branch should be looking at. It's totally two different things. I wanna point that out. That's the fallacy of doing that type of thing with a select board. There are other documents out there that spell out the actual process. We've never, in fact, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that we ended up creating a subcommittee to take and talk about the advisory bylaw. It shouldn't have been a subcommittee to talk about, and I've said this before, to take and talk about the advisory bylaw. It should be, how do we get past the conflict in the bylaws that was created by the Board of Selectmen? That's really what I see. Maybe I'm wrong, but the advisory bylaw is much like much other communities. We follow if you look at most other communities, 75 to 90% of it is the same. There's a few points that are different for this community, but you can also find other communities that do the same thing for those, like having the members ended up, if there's a vacancy, filling it. I mean, we're not the only community that does that, folks. That's not that. But now my concern is that you created that committee, 2 people from here and 2 people from the selectmen. Well, lo and behold, now you have a selectman that no longer will be here after yesterday's meeting. The last time you're going to see him is at the joint meeting, the all boards meeting. Mr. Kaplan says he's not. So this has fallen by the wayside. My concern is now that you're not going to do that, you're going to have somebody put on the warrant, changing the advisory bylaw. It's coming. I can see it. And it hasn't been discussed as to how to get rid of that conflict.
Well, we did discuss it, and you're right, it fell away. Like, we didn't wind up, there was concerns about, open meeting law, actually having the mandate to have
Right,
that
but
special session, yeah.
those things were closed off. That committee, that joint committee, it was
They never
created
met.
there, and you never really met because there's no minutes or nothing.
Right. Well, they didn't meet.
That's what I'm saying, is it fell by the wayside. I'm concerned about having things fall by the wayside like that. One of the other things is when you talk about the roles and responsibilities, not only did I feel well, is that even when I had a good day, I went, why do it on just today? Because even if I were to get this document done today, where it should be published after it's accepted would be on the town website.
Right.
We have yet
Right.
got all the documentation that we already have on the website, and that's fallen by the wayside.
And I think their answer to that is gonna be, we're redesigning the webpage, we wanna wait.
Probably.
Do you feel comfortable with that, and you buy that? That's,
I buy
Well-
that they're changing it, but I'm not comfortable
Yeah,
with
yeah,
not
so it's a
having
yes and no.
the ability to post
I
items.
I guess I'm the bad guy. I bring these things out for you all to take and think about, because I've thought about them and said, I'm not sure I like it. The direction I see things going and falling by the wayside. It doesn't feel like we're expending some effort here to do something, and it's falling by the wayside. We're not helping the community to the level that we should be. I mean, I've lived in this community for a lot of years, and I really have got on this for the last 7 years because I'm trying to help out my community. I'm looking at the last 7 years, some of the documentation that we have took a while. we've got it. The feedback to the selectmen over the years has been to get their act together, and I see some of that happening, but I also see that when they get a document, it's not necessarily followed. Whereby we tend to take it, I mean, we, at least in my eyes, we get a document, we tend to follow it. That's not how government should be working, folks. If you have a policy, it should be followed. Elsewise, you have anarchy in government. You just do anything and everything. I see some things that the administrator is doing that I think are positive, but there's a lot of things that I'm still concerned about. One of them is the budget process. We don't get it electronically. And this is bullshit in this day and age. To get paper copies, big books, you have to carry around, when you can go on your computer and go up, click, click, click. And if once it's updated, even after it's been done, that's bullshit. That he's got to give you another paper copy.
It can
If
be
he's
electronic. He
already
pledged
done
to-
electronically,
Well, he pledged to do it electronic. I think this board.
I didn't hear that.
Well, he's not gonna do the updates, the daily updates or the weekly updates or whatnot. Those are still, it's gonna be just another page of attachments that we'll still have to mentally, like, over here, this one, that one.
Maybe go in and
He's-
you can edit the document yourself.
Yeah, he's just not gonna go in and edit.
It
The
makes
document.
it makes my eyes, it makes our job difficult.
Yes.
It makes it much more difficult, because then you have to go flipping, you have to go and I went through that book, and it's difficult. Past members found it very, very difficult. When you go through it, you will probably find it difficult. I'll give you the book. I have no needs for last year's book, because in my eyes, we wasted time going through paper copies over and over again and not being able to take a look at it and actually put, like the bylaw calls for, a separate column that we made the recommendation to the town.
Yes.
You look at time and time again other communities, and it says, even the state law, is that this committee is the one that presents the budget, and I'm sure you heard that at the the Association of Town Finance meeting, from somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, other communities do this, and they don't have the problem that we have. I'm not sure why. And to take it into, there's a Mass General law that basically says that if you change the format of the budget, like was done 2 years ago, and I'm not by the way, I'm not against it, because I actually advocated to end up having an omnibus budget, but with the details. What has happened to our budget process? The amount of accounts has dropped down. I guess it's because I've been around so long, I see the process and what's happening, and I question it. When this accountant came on board a number of years ago, it was a part-time. Believe it or not, folks, this was like 25 hours. Because of the transition from cities and towns to Vadar, that didn't go smoothly, that individual went from 25 hours to 40 hours at additional cost to the community. And that's what I saw, additional cost. I mean, if you go way, way back, and that's, our accountant at one time was $45,000 a year, and that individual only came in 1 day a week. I guess when you start looking at those things, you start questioning what's happening with the process. Now, in the last couple of years, now we have an account that's 40 hours. I hear we got an assistant, and now we got another assistant. So that's, I'm not one to take and end up building government. I think government, if you keep going, the more money you bring in, you just keep throwing it and get more people. That's not the answer. Competent people is the answer that can get the job done at the time. And to take and dumb down, and this is me saying this, and I think other people on the last committee saw this, is to take and dumb down the amount of accounts and roll them up into one thing called selectmen's budget. You don't have that individual accountability that you got down there to take and see what that individual, you're not seeing what's happening way down. I mean, that's what the legislation does,
Right.
the legislative bodies
Yeah.
do. I
So-
mean, that's our job. You can end up getting it however you want from executive, but when you start digging down and to find out what's going on, you might question and say, why are we paying this individual so much for that particular position? Do we really need it? And those are the type of questions that you really have to take an answer in when you get to that level. So omnibus budget with detail, you'll see a lot of communities do that. They have the higher level, and by the way, when the previous administrator was here, it was done that way. Upper level, detail, all the account numbers. Since this administrator has come, it's
Yeah.
upper level.
So I want to bring your point to a close. So you brought it up, and it's under the guise of bylaws and being able to make sure that, that we maintain the continuity. If we say we're going to do something, we're going to meet, that we do that.
Yeah.
In this situation, you say, all right, this bylaw change is coming. Regardless of how the Board of Selectmen's makeup changes or doesn't change, you're advocating, or at least you're highlighting the fact that that's gonna come. So we either have to take a look at how it's going to change, or we need to preempt that change,
Right.
whether it's a community effort, a referendum,
Right.
to be able to change the bylaw to suit the state law and efficient
Right, this is why we had the
budgeting
bylaw.
process.
And the reason
So
I.
that's what we need to take a look at.
Right.
We don't need a physics class or a civics class right now. What we need is to say, what problem do we see?
Yep.
Which you're highlighting, and I think you did a good job of basically, setting that up. But we're only, I mean, you know, we're a brand-new body, we're learning, we're getting pretty good at it, we're pretty motivated, but as a body, we look at it and say, all right, Will, we agree with you. We see that this is not going the way of a proper budget season and the effects on the community.
No.
What can we do to be able to get to that
Right.
point? And I think that it has a lot to do with the discussion with the Board of Selectmen to say, this is what we believe the town administrators is going to recommend for a bylaw change. And either we say, no, that's not going to work for our community, or it's against,
Well, the reason I bring it up is, if this changes now, okay, this is a long-term effect, folks. This is not
Agreed,
just,
agreed.
this is not just because of the last advisory committee or
Right.
this advisory, and we disagree with someone, disagreement is not bad. Working through disagreement is good, and that's my view of it. Just because we disagree with some of the methods is, there should be open communications, and it hasn't happened. By the way, there was many times that the present chairman and past chairmans were invited from the board that they can end up coming along with other members, and it never happened. Don't ask me why, I can't answer for them.
Yeah.
All I
He
can
hasn't,
say is it didn't
he was
happen.
touting his record, like he said he was 11 for 12 for overrides and things like that. So the last, he was not happy about the last town meeting. It did not go his way because people spoke up and they were able to speak their voice on the floor.
That's how town meetings should
Well,
work.
it could very well happen that way, but if you don't get the information out there, if you don't have the discussion, then the bylaw will change and it will have lasting
Right, that-
effects.
I'm bringing it up now because I wanna take
Absolutely.
and end up getting ahead of the curve here. To take and let you know how I feel about the direction it's going, and the impact. I mean,
So let's keep it on the agenda.
Well, I
Right.
think we
I
need to
mean-
have a suitable counter. We can predict what might be coming down the pipe because it was on the annual town meeting last year.
that's correct.
So they're
And
gonna,
by the way, it's been on for the last 4 years.
I would bet dollars to donuts, it's gonna be the same thing coming back at us.
So
If
we have
we're
to be
ready,
preemptive about it.
we can present and counter at town meeting and perhaps
That's what I'm talking
as a
about.
unit, be able to show the town what it is we mean and what the value is
Right.
of
I concur.
keeping this body intact and
As
giving
a
back
board
a
or
little of,
individuals?
but giving back a little bit of the power that maybe has been slowly sort of like, I'll just do that. I'll just take care of that this time. Because I agree with you and.
That's why that's why many months ago, I ended up saying you need to take, I brought that out about why advisory or finance committees were established. And I gave documentation to Jeff, and he followed up, and we kind of, yes, we did some stuff, we talked about it, we talked about doing some stuff, but that communications is between 7 people. And what few people watch, including the administrator. As you heard him say, he watches, he watches this that they can end up, in some cases, he watches that they can end up saying what I'm gonna end up saying and pushing back and giving you my opinion. I mean, I feel strongly enough that I wanna give my opinion so that whether you go along with it or agree or disagree, I at least wanna put it out there for discussion as to everybody else's feelings. You went to a association meeting, you got to see what other communities doing, how do you feel about your community? I think that's the bottom line as to where we are.
So,
I'm sorry to take up so much.
no, I think it was worthwhile for you to speak your mind about it. So what I've done is I've just added to keep that discussion going, that we should expect on the annual town meeting for the same, section 4, is it section
Yeah.
4?
Yeah.
Section 4, if it makes the warrant, then we've got to be able to prepare now. So I've got it on that.
So can I just ask then?
Sure.
Because we were supposed to have that subcommittee where the two boards were coming together, and I'm a big fan of communicating with each other. Is that still something that's possible that you can no? Or-
You've got
I
one
can-
selectman that's just resigned, you've got another selectman that says he's done as this year. I don't see the motivation there for either of those
One was
individuals.
public, I think one is gleaning.
Well, but
Well, we just, as a
they'll serve
board-
out through the town meeting though, right? Not the one that just resigned,
Yeah.
but if
The
someone's
town
not,
election, the
sorry,
spring
town
election,
election,
yeah.
sorry. So will they still be there? There will still be that board of selectmen working on the warrant.
Four, right? No, not 5.
But those 4 will still be working on the warrant for town meeting?
The
So-
administrator makes the warrant up for the selectmen to go through and vote whether that's the warrant that they want.
Right.
Or they actually, some selectmen have input to that and say, I want this on the warrant.
Okay,
That doesn't happen too often, from what I have seen. The warrants have been mainly
Well,
put
the
out
chair-
there.
The chair has a lot of input on what goes on the warrant and what goes before the board. I know that he's been involved with that process and has meetings. But what our point is, to Deb's question, is whether they're leaving or not, we still can ask the Board of Selectmen, well, send your reps. It may not be who you thought it was going to be, but we can still have the discussion.
right.
It was, Amy, was it you and I? Or was it
No, it was Jeff,
Jeff?
you and Jeff.
Okay, so it was Jeff and I. We just go back and we like, we want to have the discussion. The reason why it didn't happen, I forget where it was in the email, but they said that they cannot just form, there was a rule for how to form a subcommittee.
Yep.
And we had not followed that, or they had not gone through that procedure to form that. So I think we just need to dig that up and say, all right, well, to form a subcommittee takes this, so let's do it. If
Right.
if it's a town meeting to do that, then we can
They've
ask.
already formulated that because the town clerk has put that on, scheduled meetings for that body, that
I didn't see
subcommittee.
that.
It is, yes. If you go on, the scheduling portion of it, you'll see that she actually put in,
I was unaware of that.
if you, well, I see that she has done that, let's put it this way. And if you, my memory serves me right, I'm not sure as to whether it was brought up by the selectmen, brought up by her, or on the administrator's weekly report. But it was out there that that body was formulated and that they could now hold meetings and that they had to post it and
Okay.
have
So then we
meeting
just-
minutes.
Then we just failed to follow up with that. So if they've created that subcommittee, then we just have to basically set a date and discuss it.
Which I
To
think
to
would be
basically
beneficial.
absolutely, to iron out what the differences are. As I just wrote it down, comparison of current, proposed, and compromise.
Because originally, when that was done in 15 by the selectmen, it was a pushback that they wanted to take and end up changing the advisory, and we said, no. If you're gonna change that, hasn't having anything to do with the advisory. It means that the selectmen and the administrator start the budget process. It's not the responsibility of the advisory to take and end up going out to the departments to get the budget,
Right. Well, I think part of
Now-
the confusion was adding a town administrator,
right?
because there's disparity in the town bylaws.
Yeah.
Because there's no clear definition,
That's correct.
the way I read it anyway, on the role of the town administrator, comma, the role of the advisory committee. And the advisory committee cannot be eliminated. And I think perhaps the initial idea, maybe in 2015, maybe it's just my perception, is that they would like to take all of the teeth out of advisory and just make us a board of people that sit here and are like, oh, okay, thanks for those numbers. So it's our job to push back. So if we can't get that subcommittee going, we just need to start showing up at Board of Selectmen meetings. And first, the beginning of the meeting, when they ask for open comment, we have open comment. We want to talk about the bylaw. We want to talk about the advisory committee's role. And as a unit, between the group of us, we could probably make a concerted effort to make that known that we are ready. And we want to have this discussion, I think, before it hits the warrant.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there is, it's just, DLS has a format that basically says is that selectmen, finance, and school committee meet to talk about the budget. That's one step. The other thing is you'll see many communities do is that the administrator or manager sits down with the advisory committee and they talk about whether, the guidelines for the budget. What do I mean by guidelines? Guidelines are that the budget is level funded, it's increased by 2.5%, it's decreased by 1%. I mean, those are the type of discussions based upon the revenue and everything else and what's going on, they should have, so that they can end up giving those guidelines before they submit the request to the departments and the committees for their budgets. Here's the guidelines. This is what your budget should be. It shouldn't be more than 1% above. We made that decision.
Right.
And that's what you put out there. It's like any business. If you're a department head, your boss comes down and says, okay, you can end up having your budget, but don't go over a certain amount of percentage. Here's the percentage that you can go up, and you better make it, and that's including your raises, et cetera. I mean, I'm sure you've gone through that, Lee. Is that somebody's come down and said, because you don't have carte blanche on your budget, sometimes it would be nice.
So,
It's not like
I have it as a budget item, so we can talk about the structure of it at the next meeting. I'll entertain, is there any other member comments?
No.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
motion. To adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourning at 8:50 or 20.